Hi, I'm Martyn Zub, re-recording mixer on Beastie Boys Story, and you're listening to Contra Zoom.
This is Contra Zoom, where we go back and forth about films. I'm your host, Dakota Arsenault, and this week's episode is presented by Aesthetic Magazine. In case you didn't catch last week's housekeeping update, I'll fill in everyone here. In very exciting news, we now have a website. Go to contrazoompod.com for all your Contra Zoom needs. You can find all past episodes and guest appearances on there currently, and in the future there'll be plenty more great content, so make sure you bookmark it. Also, I'm working on getting some stickers printed soon, so if you leave a review on iTunes or Podchaser, I'll send you some stickers for free. Just send an email to contrazoompod@gmail.com showing your 5-star rating and review. On today's episode, I had the opportunity to talk to Martyn Zub, the re-recording mixer for the Apple TV Plus documentary Beastie Boys Story. The doc was nominated for 5 Emmys, including Outstanding Documentary or Nonfiction Special, Outstanding Writing for a Nonfiction Program, Outstanding Picture Editing for a Nonfiction Program, Outstanding Sound Editing for a Nonfiction or Reality Program, and Outstanding Sound Mixing for a Nonfiction or Reality Program. The last 2 of which Martyn Zub received nominations for. These are the first Emmy nominations for Martyn, but he has previously worked on all 3 John Wick movies, both Deadpools, Nocturnal Animals, Nightcrawler, Atomic Blonde, Frozen, The Space Between Us, and Ghost in the Shell, to just name a few, making him one of the most in-demand sound mixing and editors in Hollywood. In case you aren't familiar with Beastie Boys Story, Mike D and Ad Rock went on a small tour in 2019, retelling the band's history after putting out an autobiography in 2018. The live show was filmed by director Spike Jonze, who filmed many of the group's iconic music videos including Sabotage, Sure Shot, and Time for Livin'. The movie is a mix of TED Talk style with plenty of classic clips and photographs, showing the band from their early teenage years to the very final performance the band played on June 12, 2009 at Bonnaroo. The band was always one of my favorites growing up, even though my age meant I got into them pretty late. I remember I had traveled to Montreal to see friend of the show Sebastian Hines graduate from the National Theatre School, and as I was arriving, I learned the news about Adam Yauch's passing. The news hit me pretty hard, as his strong political beliefs and general fun demeanor was inspiration to me that you can care very deeply about the world around you, but still have fun with your best friends. That night, while I was out at a bar, the DJ played almost only Beastie Boys songs in honor of MCA, making it a very bittersweet evening. Let's now listen to my interview with Martyn Zub.
You ready?
Yeah.
Now here's a little story that I got to tell about 3 bad brothers that you know so well. It started way back in history with Ad Rock, MCA, and me, Mike D. Hello, everyone.
What we're gonna do right here is go back, way back into time.
The Beastie Boys.
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 I'm now joined by Martyn Zub, a sound editor, designer, and re-recording mixer whose latest project, Beastie Boys Story, directed by Spike Jonze, has earned Martyn an Outstanding Sound Editing for a Non-Fiction or Reality Program and Outstanding Sound Mixing for a Non-Fiction and Reality Program Emmy nominations. Martyn, thank you so much for joining me today, and do you struggle with remembering the exact categories that you were nominated for?
Thanks, Dakota. Great to meet you. Yeah, a little bit. There's a bit of a mouthful when you said it like that, but no, it's kind of humbling to be nominated in 2 categories.
I even removed the end where it was single or multi-use camera as well. Every year, I struggle with coming up with good analogies and descriptions to decipher the differences between sound editors and sound mixers. Can you help a movie lover out by breaking it down in layman's terms?
Yes, absolutely. So sound editorial is we get the raw tracks from, in this instance, from the live show that it was put together across 4 different concerts across North America. And then in sound editorial, that is cut together in sync to the picture. And then that comes in as raw tracks. So there could be, in this instance, there was like 70 live microphones, probably 12 tracks of music, probably 20 tracks of sound effects. And then all those tracks get given to the sound mixer. In this instance, it was myself as well. And then we'd go on to a mixing stage, which is ultimately like a movie theater minus all of the seats and probably one row of seats with a mixing console at it. And then from the editorial to the mixing process, it's just weeding through all the material to make it sound seamless and play out of the right speakers and at the right level, and to make it sound like a film ultimately.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious to know, what is your history with the Beastie Boys and their music? Were you a fan of theirs beforehand, or did you not know much about them until you were on the job?
I was certainly a fan of them. I've seen them live in Australia a number of times growing up as a teenager, and they definitely have been a big inspiration of how I hold myself in terms of culturally, politically, fashion even as well. But I'm always been a big fan and everything that they've done. And then it was kind of a little bit daunting before because sometimes you don't want to meet your heroes. And then once I actually met these guys, Adam and Mike, and they seemed really humble and super cool, as you'd expect them to be. So it was great to actually, tick that box and say, oh, cool, I'm fortunate these guys are really lovely guys as well, and collaborative people as well.
I'm so happy to hear that. This film, Beastie Boys Story, sticks out in your very long list of credits. You've worked on all the John Wick movies, the Deadpool ones, Frozen, Nightcrawler, and much more, but this was essentially sort of a cross between a stand-up special and a TED Talk with Ad Rock and Mike D narrating their lives in front of a screen. How is this job different from your usual work?
Well, it was in the essence, it's considered like a documentary as such, but it's definitely the filmmakers involved, from picture editorial and to Spike Jonze being the director. It was always treated like a feature film as we saw it, with almost like you could feel like there's act 1, 2, and 3. So in that instance, when we were actually in the trenches and just doing the actual work, it didn't feel like a documentary. It felt like, we're working on a film here. And, we could feel the highs and lows and progressively get to, the third act. And, it's the reflective moment when they talk about, MCA's passing, and it's a relatively sad moment. But then they come back again and say, it was all worth it, and they would never change a day in their life. So, it was certainly treated like a feature film in that process. In a documentary sense, the crew was a lot smaller, like it was very intimate, but I get the sense this is the first film that I've worked with Spike on, and it felt like that it is kind of a small, intimate crew, like family as such. So it's kind of, it was great fun to be, let in to be a part of that as well. But yeah, definitely, I couldn't feel any real difference between this is a documentary and a feature film. We treated it like a feature every day.
That's fascinating. Were you involved for only the post-production, or did you have a hand in the sound for the live shows?
No, I was only involved in the post-production part of it. I got involved when I think they were in, 70% of their way into picture editorial, and then I met Spike and the producers, and then I came on it after that fact, and then worked on some rough cuts of some scenes and sequences to get a bit of a style palette to get Spike's approval, and then he kind of let me go at it, and then turn it into something before I actually reviewed the whole film with him.
Interesting. Yeah, that was something I was kind of curious about, was like the involvement of Spike in this process. Was he there sort of right from the beginning, or was he more there towards the end of the assignment?
He was right there from the beginning, and then he let our crew go away and do what we kind of felt was right. And then we reviewed it a couple of times with the picture editors, Jeff and Zoe. And then that was great fun as well, because Jeff in particular, he's worked with Spike on a couple of his films, and he's in commercial world as well, so he really understands his sensibility. And from the first day I met Spike, those first scenes, I was mixing it kind of more like a rock concert, in places, but he really wanted to make it feel intimate in certain sections, and that kind of was like the style palette for the whole film. And then that kind of dictated what we did in the mix as well. And then Spike came back towards the end for the final. He was there for all of the ADR, and then came back for the final mix as well.
Interesting. That sort of pivots to what I want to talk about next, because in a normal film, for the most part, a sound designer's job is much larger than a viewer could even imagine, but it's also invisible to the viewer. You want everything to sound normal and in place, even in heightened scenarios. But here in Beastie Boys Story, the audience is acutely aware of every needle drop and even expecting them. How did you approach that style?
That's a good question. But originally, we cut it more like a feature film as well. We had like more sound effects, like spot sound effects throughout the whole film. And then after a while, they wanted less is more type of thing to pull it all away. So a lot of the material that we originally cut, and we had to try because you never know what you'll find. Might find a cool little moment that's going to help tell the story even a bit more. But then from the audience. And then from the audience session, we had so many live microphones as well, so we were able to kind of push those crowd reactions up and then pull them back when we needed to at any given time. So it kind of felt as natural as possible, and that was the whole idea, to make it feel like that we were sitting, in row 15 on the night. But then also when we wanted to be intimate, we could really lean into the dialogue and just pull everything out. So we were just left with Adam and Mike on stage.
Wow, that's really fascinating. How long did you work on this project, and how does it compare to the amount of time you're usually on board for?
Okay, the sound process started November last year, but it wasn't like a linear run. It was kind of broken up because we'd get to sections and we'd go, the filmmakers want to go away with it and try some things and come back. And then so then we worked up right up until the drop dead deadline, until when Apple needed it to actually premiere. And so it was kind of like a lot of the time it was a couple of weeks here, then a couple of weeks there. So it wasn't consistent the whole time. Whereas a lot of feature film schedules were on from day one of post production and will be right to the end of post production, because things keep changing and evolving the whole time. And it actually, it gave credit to the film as well, the Beastie Boys Story, because it wasn't it didn't start out being a large studio film and with countless open pockets and until Apple got involved, and even then it was kind of kept lean and mean really. So we kind of had to be a lot smarter with how we used our resources and our calendar as well. So in that aspect, it was a bit different. So it started on November last year up until the release date, which was, I think it was February or March. I can't recall. But yeah.
That's great. These are your first Emmy nominations. I'm interested to hear how you found out and your reaction to this great news.
Oh yeah, totally humbled and honoured to be a part of these awards. And I found out one morning, I didn't know the nominations were coming out. I was actually mixing on another film I'm still working on at the moment. And then a colleague sent me a text message like at 8 o'clock in the morning saying, "Hey, congratulations, well done." And I was thinking, and I took a moment to think about it and pause and think, what have I done? And then I texted him back, shortly after and said, "Hey, not to be rude, but what are we congratulating each other for?" And then he said, "Oh, the nominations came out. You got nominated." And then I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And then, jumped online, had a look, and sure enough, got one nomination and sent it to my wife. And then she came back and said, "Oh, no, you actually got 2 nominations." Oh, wow, that was even more unexpected. So, it was ultimately, it was very humbling to actually get recognized by your peers. And then I think it's a reflection on all the great work that our team has done over the years, but to get acknowledged on such a great film such as Beastie Boys Story makes it even better.
That is a fantastic story, and that sort of leads me to my next thing, where filmmaking is a collaborative effort, and you share your Emmy nominations with other people on your team, a sound effects editor and sound editor for the sound editing nomination, and then 2 production mixers on the sound mixing one. I'd love to hear about the different roles that these people play in the final product.
Okay, yeah, so on the mixing side of it, the other 2 gentlemen that got nominated were the live mixers on the live concerts of the night. So they're responsible for capturing all the audio and recording it to tape, and which is a task in itself, considering how many live microphones were there on any given night. And the end result sounds fantastic, so it's kind of thankful once we got to my fingertips as I started mixing that the sound of it, it's there and I'm just there. My job is to enhance it and to tell the story when I'm mixing it. And then the sound editorial side, we actually have to go through all the tracks and cut everything to picture, resync everything and make sure we've got the right tracks playing. Phase align a lot of the material because there's so many microphones, then add sweeten sounds and, recut music and, and make it work to pitch a bit more. Even though Pitch Editorial has done a great process of, what we call the avid track or the temp track, and then it's our job to, polish that and elaborate on it to make it the best thing possible.
That's really cool. I always love hearing about some of the people that we don't always hear about in the news.
Yeah, and it's definitely a team and a collaborative effort. And then also we're trying to get on the editorial nomination now. There was the sound designers and editors that did a lot of work on the live night, like cued kind of cool sound moments to real elements as well. And that's part of the process. And hopefully we can get them on the nomination ballot for sound editorial.
In my opinion, the Beastie Boys Story was one of the first casualties of COVID-19, as it was set to premiere at South by Southwest back in March, and the festival was canceled at the last minute. Has COVID changed the way you're working on any current or upcoming projects?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was devastating that South by Southwest didn't happen because I'd never been and I was excited to go that. But since then, as we all know, we're all trapped in our houses a fair bit. It definitely has changed the way that we work and operate. At the moment, I'm sitting in our second bedroom in our apartment, which now looks like a recording studio because I've got speakers and computers everywhere. So I've bought my sound editorial rigs and computers from the studio home. Which is a lot of our facilities aren't open yet. I work for a company called Formosa Group, and then we're trying to be skeleton staff at the moment to keep the contact down and as much isolation as possible. So a lot of people are working from home now, which, it has its pros and cons because you can roll out of bed and roll on to your Pro Tools system and start cutting away. But also it's not a sound treated room, and then the neighbours obviously will get a bit annoyed with if you're playing gunshots at real loud level and they think, what the hell is going on next door? But in terms of mixing, we have a facility open in Hollywood that we're trying to do as much as possible to keep the place open. So we're running, watching everything that the CDC does, and we're following those guidelines and keeping the clients at minimum and the people on the stage and contact at minimum, and checking temperatures, doing, we're actually on a film now. I'm working with Netflix. We're getting tested every week for COVID, which is great and, fortunate that we're able to do that. But it does bring a sense of confidence about to keep the industry going and moving along as well. But yeah, definitely everything's changed, and I think it's going to be like this for a while in post-production. And then I hear that they're starting to shoot material now as well, which is great because I kind of feel like that the post-production path is going to suffer a bit more. But every month they haven't been shooting, productions haven't been shooting, is going to be a downturn in post-production that we'll probably be scrambling for work for a couple of months, a month at a time that they haven't been shooting, we won't be working as well. So it's certainly changed things, and hopefully, people start being smarter about it, and then we can get out the other side of this, really.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, where I feel like in maybe 6 months to a year, there's going to be this huge influx of work, whether it's post-production or other work to be done, and wondering what that is going to cause on the industry.
Yeah, well, hopefully that's a good thing to have, like a good problem to have.
Lots of work.
Yeah, lots of work would be fantastic. But we're just not affected. Everybody is affected, as we all know. Everybody's affected by it, and we're starting. Yeah, I'm just hoping that productions can get up safely and smartly so that they can get the industry rolling out as well. Because as we all know, everybody's screaming for content because everybody's nearly downloaded the whole internet and watched everything online. So it'll be good to get going.
Yeah. The Beastie Boys Story was released on Apple TV, and as a sound person, does it worry you that most people are going to be viewing this movie on things like a TV without a proper sound system, their laptops, or even their phones?
Yes and no. I think that's just the times that we're in. We we originally mixed this in native Atmos for theatrical, and then we did home Atmos, which is another format. Then we did all the formats. We did 7.1 and 5.1, then stereo. Then I actually did another pass of the mix, just wearing my Apple AirPods on the mixing stage, just to hear how it would translate. Because in honesty, this is how a lot of this is going to be watched in this time in our life at the moment. So, as long as people are watching it and they're interested in it and it sounds good to them, and as we know, computers are sounding better. There's better speakers in it. There's headphones and AirPods and earbuds are all sounding better. So it's just kind of what it is, really. And then as long as you can kind of translate that material in those platforms, I think it's cool, really.
That's cool. That always reminds me of the old story of back in the 80s, Guns N' Roses wanted to do this super high-tech mixing with their album, and one of the members, I think Slash, was like, most of our listeners are going to be listening to it on a crappy boombox cassette. You need to mix it for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure they would have had what we call orotones, these small little mono speakers in the studio, and they would have referenced through that because, as we know, people would be listening to it, boom boxes driving around in their cars. I'm good with it. It's just what we got to do, really, and we're going to be flexible with it as well.
That's good that you're so positive. Just for pure curiosity, I showed my ignorance earlier by being a bit confused between sound editing and sound mixing. As someone who dabbles in both, I'd love to get your opinion on the Oscars consolidating the two categories going forward to just be best sound. That's kind of a hot topic within our community. I could see it. I could definitely see the positives for it because the public, a lot of the public, still don't know the difference that well. I think it's a good thing for the sound branch. It does mean less awards, but I do believe that the same amount of people that would have got nominated for editing and nominated for mixing are both able to get onto the sound category. So ultimately, nobody misses out. And I think that over the years, the people that voted for sound kind of didn't help themselves a little bit as well, like voting the same films for editorial and mixing. So it kind of felt like it was going to happen at any given time. It doesn't bother me, like a sound, but they are two hugely different disciplines. But I see the pros and cons with it. I can definitely see why they did it. Even for the show, is really to make the show more streamlined and make it more interesting. But I just as long as people get recognised for the work that they did, because the line is so blurred these days. Because a lot of the time when I'm doing sound editorial in my room, in my studio, I'm also going, I'm booked to be the mixer as well. So I'm kind of editing and mixing as I go along at that early stage to see how everything's playing. So it's kind of natural progression in this digital age of how mixes evolve. A lot of the time we do audience intent mixes, and when we do those preview mixes, a lot of those sounds are in there that will get carried through right till final mix, just because we're in this digital world now. So a lot of that time the editorial and mixing lines are a bit blurred. So I do think it's a good thing. And as long as people get recognised for the hard work that they did, and it kind of, and people start, acknowledge sound even just a bit more now, really, as well. That's awesome. I am so happy I asked you that. Beastie Boys Story is available to watch on Apple TV, so check it out. Martyn, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Dakota. Thank you so much, and thank you for making yourself available on a Sunday.
We went from being famous in a 14-block radius to being on tour with Madonna and Rick Rubin.
The shows kept getting bigger and bigger.
We morphed from making fun of party bros to actually becoming those dudes.
We were burning out.
I just didn't even recognize the person that I had become at that point. Yo, hold up. It's not over yet.
Go!
I want to thank Martyn Zub and Apple TV Plus for arranging the interview. Best of luck to Martyn and everyone else nominated for Beastie Boys Story at this year's Emmys. Speaking of the Emmys, since this year's show isn't being held live and in person, they pivoted to have them pre-recorded. The Creative Arts Awards, which basically is all the more minor categories, will be broadcast over the course of a week from September 14th through the 17th. On Monday the 14th will be the reality and non-fiction categories. On the 15th will be the variety categories. On the 16th will be the scripted night 1. And on the 17th will be the scripted night 2 categories. These will all be streamed on Emmys.com. On Friday, September 18th, Jimmy Kimmel will host the pre-recorded ceremony to announce all the biggest awards in TV programming for the last year. HBO's Watchmen led all programs in the primetime categories with 11 nominations, including Outstanding Limited Series, Regina King and Jeremy Irons for the lead performances, Jovan Adepo, Lou Gossett Jr. and Gene Smart for supporting performances. Succession was the second most nominated show with 10, but the show I'm most excited for was Schitt's Creek, which garnered 8 nominations for the final season of the little Canadian show that could. It was nominated for Outstanding Comedy Series, a feat that they also earned last year too. It also picked up nods for all 4 main cast members, Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara, Dan Levy, and Annie Murphy. Dan Levy also picked up additional nominations for his directing and writing on the show. Another show that came to a close this past year was The Good Place, which is going up against Schitt's Creek for Outstanding Comedy Series. Stars Ted Danson, Darcy Carden, and William Jackson Harper all got acting nominations too. As for networks, Netflix led all competitors with a whopping 37 main primetime nominations, with their shows Ozark, The Crown, Hollywood, Unorthodox, Dead to Me, and The Kominsky Method leading the way. Usual powerhouse HBO came in second with 32 nominations, including the aforementioned Watchmen and Succession, but also Insecure and Big Little Lies. The other big streaming giant Hulu ended up with 14 nods, mostly coming for The Handmaid's Tale and Rami. My personal favorite ongoing show is FX's What We Do in the Shadows, the spin-off from the Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi film, which got 4 nominations, including Best Comedy Series, and scoring 3 of the 7 Outstanding Writing for a Comedy Series, which makes me very happy. That about wraps up this episode. I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Martyn Zub. I want to thank Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. Thank you to Aesthetic Magazine for presenting the show. Follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at ContraZoomPod. I'll plug it once more, but please visit ContraZoomPod.com for all your CZP needs and bookmark it, as I'll be adding lots of cool content to it over time. Please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts, and send me a screenshot to ContraZoomPod@gmail.com, and I'll add you to a list to mail you free swag when they are available. Thanks for listening.